Yo, Tripolar Bear. Let's talk about some stuff that I've been doing on the build and some kind of changes that I've been making that I think are for the better. There's some kind of variations going on. There's kind of some question of what I'm doing and if I'll make an update. And I figured I would just have a video where I talk about some of the changes that I've made for my kind of playstyle and kind of how I've tailored the build and also what I do for my Siruses or other kind of hard bosses. So first of all, what you're going to notice is I picked up a pair of Asenath's Gentle Touch, and I got vulnerability on hit on these. Now you can do a divination card that gives a double corrupted version of these, but I was able to just snag a pair that had Vul on hit. If you don't have vulnerability on hit, really all you have to do is get a ring that has Vul on hit. So it's really not too big of a deal. The ring mod's pretty easy. You can just grab a vulnerability on hit, grab some life, and then craft a resistance on there. You should be totally fine. Also, I like using Bisco's Leash early on in the league. The quant and the rarity are nice. And then you get Rampage, which is this kind of like stacking buff. It shoots red spikes out. You detonate the corpses that are nearby. It's very cool. The Bisco's Leash. And I'm using the Mist Wall, so I'm leaning into the die less, but still with the Carcass Jack and whatnot. The Mist Wall is very good. I get a lot of questions like, why are you using the Mist Wall? Why not dual wield? Well, bro, all right, brother, I have enough damage. I have enough damage. So I figure, why not cap my block, right? We cap our block, and we have a chance to avoid elemental damage, right? It's not elemental ailments we're avoiding. It's just elemental damage that we avoid while phasing, which I think is just absolutely bonkers. A bunch of evasion rating on there as well. All my other pieces are pretty tame. This is the same old amulet. It's got overcharged as the anointment, not overcharge. That is just a power charge. You have to have the overcharged on there for the chance to gain all the charges, right? You have a chance to gain power, frenzy, or endurance charge on kill. So that's how we get our frenzy and endurance charges, which is very nice. Bottled Faith and a Cinder Swallow, right, were crit, so I just want to crit more. Realistically, so depending on where you're at in the build, if you don't have a 6-link Carcass, that's totally fine. I would just do a +2 AoE Tabula. You can get +2 Corrupted AoE on a Tabula for like 20 Chaos or something. It's such a huge damage boost. I would use that on the Carcass, or on the build before a 5-link Carcass, right? I would just use the Tabula until you get Carcass. And next, I think the biggest upgrade, honestly, is a Asenath's Glove for some nice explosions so that we can still use Carcass, which is a lot of AoE and area damage. It's very good. And these gloves are pretty much just an explosion chest of sorts, except they don't remove corpses, but that's totally fine. This is very nice. Again, you don't need the vulnerability, and we have some questions about what overlaps, right? There's a temp chains curse on here from the gloves, right? Enemies killed near corpses affected by your curses, right? Or not, enemies near corpses are going to be cursed with temp chains, but the vulnerability applies over that. If you get vul on hit corruption, or if you get a vul on hit ring, it overlaps the temp chains from Asenath's. So you just need vulnerability on hit. And depending on what stage you are, vulnerability might be better than Assassin's Mark as well. And it's just a nice ease of use once you get it on hit on a ring or a glove corruption. But anyway, another big change. I use just Flesh and Stone. I use War Banner. And then I've actually 4-linked a Herald of Ash setup because I really love playing with Herald of Ash. And I've done this even before the Gentle Touch gloves, these Asenaths. Keep in mind, the Brutality support stops Herald of Ash from like giving any extra damage to Bladeblast, but Brutality support does not stop Herald of Ash from being super sick while clearing maps. Obviously, if you have a Conqueror map, I swap out all these gems and I put a Pride in here. And if there's a Sirus, I have a single target swap where I will actually grab my Clarity, a level 20 Clarity, and I will use that instead of Herald of Ash and instead of Pride. So we will just have a Flesh and Stone, and our War Banner setup. So Clarity helps you sustain your mana on these long boss fights. So, you know, a Sirus is going to go like this, right? You get a couple casts, you move. Couple casts, move. See, my mana is practically topping off every time. There's very few circumstances on Sirus, except like last phase splitting and whatnot, where you can just like sit there, not moving at all and pumping. And even then, we have plenty of pump time. And then you can pop your Mana Flask too. That's when I would pop Mana Flask. But on Sirus, otherwise, yo, you just do this, right? You just have a Clarity level 20. They're like 2 Chaos. Super easy. And most of the time, you'll be running around and dodging and whatnot. You get your Arcane Surge and you get even more mana. It makes it much, much easier. But let's go ahead and show off what it looks like with the explosion, the Herald of Ash, and a more complete version of the build. Now, this isn't super min-maxed. I put some money into it, but, you know, my wand is really bad. It has cast speed +1 level and a crafted spell damage, right? There's some crazy wands you can get with Harvest Crafting. And then, you know, same with my other gear. Like, it's pretty all right. I don't have a very wild helmet. It's just the conch, crafted life, and some cold resistance, right? You can get, like, nearby enemies have -9 fizz, or it's like the overwhelm. But let's go ahead. So the Herald of Ash and the Asenath's gloves, it creates like very satisfying, very large explosions, which is pretty nice because it helps our clear and it just feels good. And another huge change that I've made that I forgot to talk about actually is 2 Inspired Learnings. Inspired Learnings this league are so incredibly cheap and they are so incredibly good in rituals. You can get so many rare buffs so fast from your Inspired Learning, and then we can just shield charge on, and eventually you actually get enough buffs from Inspired Learning where you can start to just shield charge or just Bladeblast monsters. Now in a Delirium it's going to take a little bit more than that, but it's still pretty cool when it does happen. I will be grinding like in a Toll map, T16, and all of a sudden I have enough buffs where I shield charge into the pack and it actually just explodes the pack. See, I can kind of do it right there. It takes quite a few buffs when you're in the Delirium, but it's still pretty cool when you can just get the explosions going right here. Like when I have my shield charge, right? It kind of becomes almost like a bomber kind of build. And that feels pretty fun to just have your, you know, Inspired Learning give you enough damage, all the rare monsters you've killed. And then there you go. When it stops, you know, when you can't just shield charge and kill everything, you just go back to normal blade blasting. It's just like a very, very cool kind of thing. But you see in the top left, the kill counter. That's the Bisco's Leash Rampage. It was giving me, you know, red spike buffs and whatnot. But this isn't a Headhunter or anything, right? I'm not getting big off the Headhunter. I'm only getting big off of my 2 Inspired Learnings and being in Ritual. Ritual has a lot of rare monsters. And just really quick, the Inspired Learning placement is just going to be right here on the tree. We go 1, 2, 3, 4. And Inspired Learning with 4 notables, right, these big ones, you gain a rare monster modifier for 20 seconds on a rare monster kill, which is super powerful, right? Rare monsters have a lot of buffs on them. You gain one of them randomly for 20 seconds. That's really cool. So right here, I got that rare monster's haste buff, right? You can see the kind of like circly little buff around me. That's really, really cool, right? Now we move like a bunch faster. It's just like overall ups your clear a bunch, your survivability a bunch, and you can even go into the boss room with a few of these Inspired Learning buffs as well. You can kind of just like bully whatever boss is here. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, and it feels nice. And in my experience with the build, the only content that I've had problems with is going to be the big Maven stuff. So I'm talking Cortex and the Breach bosses. I was able to take down the Shaper Guardians. I was able to take down the Elder Guardians. I didn't try the rewritten memory people. I did try the Breach Lords, and that was wild. All right, Toll just camping up in the corner was super annoying. He just kept firing his little cold projectiles. Old Toll kept throwing a bunch of bleeding little things around. But overall, I'm extremely satisfied with where this build is at. I think for a league starter, This is probably one of the best League starters I've ever played. It's got a lot of damage. You get 2 Inspired Learnings, which are, I think, like one something Exalt. And then even without the Asenath gloves, just going to Herald of Ash was like super fun. You still get like some nice kind of overkill damage. And it's like a pretty big area of effect too, since we link to it a increased area of effect support to make it bigger. And then we do burning damage and Swift Affliction to make that do more damage as well. Overall though, very cool. Sirus has not been a problem as long as you as a player can do Sirus. Sirus should be more than doable on this build. And actually, I have a swamp that I do. So you see, I have... Let me just make sure there's nothing good here before I make a fool of myself. Double veiled? Alright, whatever. Hey, you missed a headhunter! You missed the thing in your video! Oh my god! Alright. So quickly, for those Inspired Learning placements, how much are they? Really quick. They're like 1.5 Exalts, which is pretty fair for how powerful they are, especially in ritual encounters where there are so many dense monsters. I think the trade website's down, so I can't get an accurate price, but 1.5 sounds about right. For the large cluster, since I'm using like Herald of Ash and I want the explosion to be big, and same with the Asenath Gentle Touch, you can make this explosion bigger for the corpses. I've actually went ahead and got the triple physical large cluster. So I've just used some Jagged Fossils. Honestly, any 3 physical things is totally fine. I just, you know, I stopped when I got fizz damage, and then this one, you know, you don't need anything special. Just any 3 are perfectly fine. And then I went to a medium cluster that has Assert Dominance. So it's an area of effect cluster, area damage. And I get 25 AoE from this. And then you can grab Towering Threat. I think these were like 30 Chaos when I picked them up. Just more AoE and some life, and then you get some extra jewel sockets that you can use. See, 25 AoE if you killed 5 enemies, and then some life and some area of effect. And here is the other Inspired Learning. If you only have one, I would do this one first, just because it is very nice. You get the life, Frenzy Charge, Heart Seeker, so this is just crit and crit multi, and then this is the only kind of odd-ish pick, but it's still not bad. You get all res, chance to evade, and max cold res, and then up here. You just grab life, frenzy, mind drinker, and resourcefulness, which is nice. You know, it's just life, frenzy charge, and then, you know, some mana, which is whatever. It's not too bad. I have my Ahuna, Glorious Vanity now as well, which gives me Overleech. This is a lot of words to say that your leech just keeps going for like 4 seconds after you've killed or after you've initiated the leech. It's just giving you overleech, which kind of turns into a regeneration, right? If you're overleeching all of the time, really it's kind of like a life regen at that point. It's just through a different mechanic, which is pretty cool. The overleech is very nice. But for the Sirus fights, I do swap some stuff around. I, like mentioned before, will use Clarity instead of my Herald of Ash. So I have Flesh and Stone and my War Banner and Clarity. And on top of that, I really like to use a replica Mistwall. Now, this is a little expensive. They're, you know, 40 Chaos or whatever just to randomly pick up for one fight. But honestly, it's super worth it. We get spell block capped, and there's so many times where I'm able to just eat something, and it's totally all right. It makes the fight so much easier for me. Alongside a Corrupted Blood Jewel, this is like probably what helped me do Sirus the most. The Clarity, Corrupted Blood, and then Replica Mistwall. This honestly carries Sirus because, you know, when he does that little tunnel where he puts the rocks down and then he shoots those balls down the tunnel, I could just eat one of these. When he does that, I just eat the first one and I keep walking. Or I dodge it, and if I mess up, you know, I can eat the second one or something. It makes the fight so much easier. You just get like a free get out of jail pass. It's pretty nice. Now, this doesn't protect you from die beams. You still have to be up on that, but it's just like a few little attacks. And I've done Sirus Awakener 9 with this, which is, you know, it's a lot of life and whatnot. It takes a little bit, even though we do have a lot of damage. You know, he's A9. He's a little tanky, but it's more than doable on this. I would say the only fights that are super tricky are going to be Maven, just because mechanically it's very difficult. The Cortex, we probably would need so much harvest juice on the gear to be able to do that. And I think eventually I could do the Breach Lords like Old Natol, but they're just so annoying. They're honestly so annoying. I hate Tull just sitting up there. He just spews his like little frost projectiles. Old Natol has the bleed spikes everywhere. It's such a cluster. It's way too much going on. But overall, very, very glad with where the build is at. It's very, very nice. I think I covered all of the changes that I've kind of slightly made. Really, I've just geared this more towards map juicing. I tried double void battery. I didn't like it. I really, really like the shield. I like shield charge with fortify. I kind of miss having wind dancer, but honestly, the 2 inspired learnings, a large cluster setup, and with how much life I have, I'm more than satisfied with it most of the time. I just have to be a little bit careful in Delirium. Anyway, I hope this guide kind of helped you guys decide where to go with your Bladefall, Bladeblast. I took a sort of hybrid approach where we still get like a bunch of clear. You saw those huge explosions, right? It's a lot of fun to play with this build in maps. And I was even doing some 100% Delirious. It's just a little bit sketchy, right? You can go back in the VOD on Twitch last night if you wanted to see that. We tried the map out. It's just super sketchy when some of those bosses come up. Especially with only like 2 inspired learnings. So it's not the best for that, but a 60 or 80% delirium is super, super easy on this, especially with inspired learnings. Once you get a few of those buffs going, you just, become unstoppable. You get too big to kill, which is pretty fun. Anyways, I'll catch you guys later, live on Twitch and on YouTube. Goodbye!